Thank you everyone for coming. My name is Darshana Merchant. I am the outreach librarian here at the Morel Memorial Library. Before I introduce the program, just a quick housekeeping things. If anybody is looking for restrooms, there is one on this floor and 3 downstairs. There's also water fountain down here, and there's some water here as well. Looks like there's just one glass, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Just wanted to introduce today's program. It is called Building Bridges, Supporting Refugee Integration in Massachusetts. And here to provide us with a wealth of information is the staff from the Refugee and Immigrant Assistance Center, also known as REAC. Is that how you say it? REAC. And this is Alexa Rutolo. She is the Community Engagement Coordinator for REAC. Those of you who are not familiar with the organization, it's a non-profit organization that provides refugee resettlement and human services agency. And I believe it provides a comprehensive resettlement options for refugees and immigrants. This presentation today is going to cover the REAC's journey on how refugees come into this country, how REAC helps them, and what can we do as a community. One last thing I want to point out is that we are all aware that immigration and refugee resettlement is always a politically charged topic. But we are not here today to talk about policies or politics. All we are going to talk about is how REAC is going to help and how we can help in this, seems to be a lot of topic crises, everybody is coming in. So please be cognizant of that when you're asking questions or making any comments. And finally, I would love to acknowledge the partners, the First Congregational Church, Norwood League of Women Voters, Together Yes, and Progress Norwood. And thank you NCM for being our community partners as well. This will be recorded and will be up on the website whenever. So without further ado, here's Alexa.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the Morel Memorial Library for hosting us tonight, and Darshana as well for organizing this program. Today we're going to touch on 4 topics, the first being the definition of a refugee, then the journey of a refugee, the role of a refugee agency such as REAC in the journey of the refugee, and as well as the state of affairs in Boston and important refugee issues we are facing today. So first, I want to start with the internationally recognized definition of a refugee. A refugee is someone who has been forced to flee their country because of persecution, war, or violence. A refugee has a well-founded fear of persecution for reasons of race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. Today, there is roughly 35.3 million refugees worldwide. This does not include internally displaced people or people who are seeking asylum. Just to give you an idea of what that number looks like, that is a little less than the population of California, which is currently around 39 million people, and it is 5 times the population of Massachusetts. So where are most refugees from? So there are 5 major countries that make up a significant portion of the refugees we are seeing today. The first one is Afghanistan, and they are largely fleeing because of the rise of the Taliban following the withdrawal of US troops. You have South Sudan. They have a lot of instability, and they have violence from their civil war that has caused a lot of people to flee. Venezuela has a lot of political and economic instability. Ukraine from the Russian invasion. And Syria from their long civil war that is still going on today. And these are just some of the reasons we've seen large amounts of people flee from these countries. And I like to show this map because it shows that there's not one race, continent, religion, language, culture of people that are affected by things such as violence, war, persecution that causes them to become refugees. Refugees can be anybody, and it can be somebody, it could be our community, it could be, any type of person. So where do most refugees settle? So the majority of refugees, about 70%, actually resettle or are settled in countries near to where they live, so they're neighboring countries. Some of the main ones include Turkey, Germany, Ethiopia are a few of the main countries that host refugees. However, the U.S. does resettle the majority of refugees through the UN system. And so what I mean by that is it's through the refugees that are designated as refugees and resettled by the UNHCR, which stands for the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. So there is a process to be resettled by the UNHCR. Basically, the main steps of this process is you become registered and they determine if you are a refugee. Once they do that, they identify the need for resettlement. So how urgent is the need for you to be resettled? Based off of safety, where you are, which group you're a part of, things like that. And that can determine how fast you are resettled. And then they refer you to one of the 20 countries that are accepting refugees from them. And the United States, this year they have referred 80,000 of their 115,000 referrals. So we do get the majority of referrals. However, the other 19 countries are very important because they will often take the refugees that don't qualify to come to the United States. All right, so now we're moving on to the journey. So a lot of refugees, they have to leave very quickly. They often leave for fear of their lives. They don't take a lot of things with them. And they make their way to refugee camps. Once they are at a refugee camp, they can stay there for somewhere between 3 to 5, but even longer years in order, just waiting to be resettled. Here they go and they go to the office of the UNHCR. They find a representative for the UNHCR, which is where they will apply to be considered a refugee. And at this time, then they wait for that application to be approved. Once it is, they go through bio screenings, they go through interviews and all of this in order to be accepted. Once they are accepted, then they have to go through medical exams, they have a cultural orientation and all of this as well when they are referred to the United States, and that's when they find out where they're going. So oftentimes they don't even know where they're going until about a month or so before they leave. They have the cultural orientation, and then once the U.S. refers them, they help or accepts them, then they help with the help of the International Organization for Migration. They help bring them over to the United States, and that is how they enter into the country, and that they are greeted by a refugee agency such as REAC to help them resettle. So on the U.S. side of that, we have the Biden administration and Congress. They're the ones that designate how many refugees are allowed to come into the country. So for the last few years, this number has been at 125,000. However, we have not actually reached that goal. It is very much it's an ambitious target that we hope to eventually hit one day. But as of this year, we've resettled 60,000 refugees. But we're hoping to continuously grow and get closer to that number. And a lot of that is largely capacity building. So once the U.S. accepts a refugee, their case. Hello? I think the mic cut out. Can you all hear me? Do you want to try and sit or? Just stop. Turn it off. I could just go without it. Okay. All right. So once the U.S. Accepts a refugee case, they send that case to one of 9 national agencies. These national agencies are contracted with the State Department to resettle refugees These agencies are the Church World Service, the Ethiopian Community Development Council, the Episcopal Migration Ministries, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, the International Rescue Committee, U.S. Committee for Refugee and Immigrants, Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services, United States Conference for Catholic Bishops, and World Relief Corporation. So some of these you might have heard of, you might have seen the logos, and we, REAP, are an affiliate of ECDC. So we work under them, we are a local agency, and we work through them to resettle refugees. So they will send cases to us when they want to resettle somebody in Boston. They send them our way, and we resettle them through ECDC. And then, so that's the reception and placement program. So that's the UN system where they come in formally through that refugee designation. But there are often secondary migrants and other classifications for people to come in through different means in order to gain refugee status. So you have asylum seekers, and that's people that come to the US border and ask for asylum, and then they come to the US and they apply for refugee status while in the United States. You'll have permanent residents who have green card holders who can also, after a certain amount of time, request or go through the process of citizenship. Temporary visa holders for skilled workers and students who, especially if they're in the country when, say, war breaks out, those can be designated as temporary protected status holders until it's safe for them to go home. And then you have the temporary status holders, which are people who are in the country when a war breaks out or there's something that happens, they say something that they could be persecuted for back home, so they request the temporary protected status to stay here while it's not safe for them to go home. And then the humanitarian parolees, who basically it's somewhat of an expedited process where when they come to the border, they are given this status on humanitarian grounds. So they're people from, so far, Haitian Cuban entrants, the Ukrainians, and Afghans. There's programs for them to come in as humanitarian parolees. They're given certain benefits and allowed to stay here temporarily for, I think right now it's 2 years, and then they can get expanded to stay here, receive benefits, and while they wait for it's safe for them to go home. Okay, so now we move on to the refugee integration and the role of the refugee agency. And I just want to take a moment here to pause and ask you all to imagine that you're a baseball player, deep into the game of baseball, giving your all on that familiar diamond-shaped field, surrounded by teammates who share a common language and play by the rules of America's pastime. You've trained for years. You know every curve of the field, every nuance of the game, and the language of baseball flows effortlessly. But suddenly, you're plucked from that game, and without warning, you find yourself on a cricket pitch, halfway across the world, and you're expected to understand the intricacies of a completely foreign game. Everything has changed: the language, the rules, the field, even the equipment. Instead of baseball bat, you're handed a cricket bat made from wood of a willow tree. The bouncer isn't someone who checks your ID at a bar. It's a fast and bouncing delivery from the baller. And when that ball dislodges the stumps, those 3 vertical sticks behind the batsman, it's not a strikeout, it's a bail that's fallen. Your new teammates speak a language you've never heard, and the rules are a maze of confusion. In this analogy, being a refugee is like the baseball player. Refugees are abruptly uprooted from the home countries, their comfort zones, and their familiar surroundings. They arrive in a foreign land, often with a language barrier that feels insurmountable, where the rules of daily life, culture, and social norms can be entirely different, just as the baseball player must adapt to the unfamiliar world of cricket. Refugees must learn to navigate a new language, customs, and societal structures. But here's the thing: just like the baseball player who faces the challenge of learning cricket, refugees are incredibly resilient. They may start from scratch in a new culture, language, and environment, but they bring their unique skills, experiences, and dreams with them. With support and understanding from the community they now call home, refugees can make valuable contributions and over time bridge the gaps between their old and new lives. So as I explain more about the refugee integration process, please remember this analogy of the baseball player turned cricketer. It reminds us of the courage and adaptability refugees possess as they embark on their journey to rebuild their lives in a foreign land where everything from the language to the rules has changed. So this is where refugee agencies such as REACT come in. So we are there to help bridge the gap. To continue with the analogy, we help to get the right equipment, to teach them the new languages, to connect them with coaches and teammates and players and trainings that can help them to really be successful and self-sufficient on the field. So the main goal of resettlement is to help refugees reach self-sufficiency through employment, community connections, and linkages to services provided as soon as possible. So when refugees arrive, there are core services that we provide. They are to help them find housing, help them find jobs, to set up schooling for their kids, ESL classes for adults, to find doctors, get them enrolled in Medicare and all of that, and to build community connections. So the key players in Boston's immigration refugee landscape is the Office for Refugees and Immigrants, otherwise known as ORI. They are the office that provides the funding and the oversight, and makes the policies on the state's help specifically towards refugees. You have the Department of Transitional Assistance, so refugees qualify for aid such as food stamps and other forms of aid depending on if they have a family or not. And then you have your refugee agencies. REACT is one of them, and then you also have Catholic Charities Boston and the International Institute of New England as well in Boston. So we are the 3 refugee resettlement agencies that resettle refugees through the UN system. And then we have community partners, one of which is public libraries are a big community partner for us because they provide literacy classes, they do, they provide like English lessons, they provide resume services, technology help, all of that, which is super beneficial for our clients, as well as another organization, JVS, Jewish Vocational Services. We refer all of our clients to them for vocational English classes and to get one-on-one career coaching to help them find jobs, start careers, or take certificates or classes that will help them grow in their career. So now we move on to the state of affairs in Boston. So these are some headlines that have been pulled from articles recently about the current Haitian and housing crisis that we've seen in Boston. Boston escalates efforts to help migrants with housing services following Biden announcement. Presley Warren MA lawmakers urge admin to streamline work authorization for new arrivals paroled in the United States. So these all might be things that you've kind of heard people talking about. So basically, there has been a large wave of Haitian and Cubans coming to Boston as a result of the Biden administration's policy to give them temporary protective status. So they are allowed to come into the country with a sponsor to come here, and they can get services, and they can, as a result of the growing instability in their own country and the large amount of Haitians at the Mexican-U.S. border. So this has resulted in a housing crisis and a work authorization backlog. So there is not enough housing in our shelters to house all the people that are coming to Boston. And one of the main reasons that we have so many people coming to Boston is because there's already a very large established Haitian community here. So a lot of people come here for their relatives or their friends, or because they know that there is a Haitian community here, they might have a connection or two. And we just don't have the capacity to house all of these people while they wait for their work authorization to kick in so they can start working, so they can start afford their essentials and pay rent and all of that. So that's why you've seen, like maybe on the news, that they've been being put up in hotels and all of that. And the work authorization backlog. So imagine like a funnel, right? All these people are coming in, and if they're all trickling down because we just don't have the capacity to move all these work authorizations through. So, and they need that paperwork to be able to work, even though which their status allows them to do. So it's just kind of getting through all of that and weeding through getting through all the people in order to be able to help them and to get them on their feet. Governor Maura Healey has declared a state of emergency last month in lieu of this crisis. And this helped free up the funding that allowed us to put people in hotels so they weren't sleeping on the streets or in Boston medical centers anymore. And we are working with community partners and resettlement agencies to make sure that all these people in hotels are receiving services, are getting help, are signing up for the programs and getting their work authorization through. And she also petitioned and received funding to give grants to agencies such as ours to be able to also help to build the capacity for work authorization so we can bring in more people to support and fill out those paperworks and get people through the system faster. So there are a lot of people working on this. There are definitely many moving parts. Many resettlement agencies and community partners have built task forces to be able to address this issue and to talk with communities and figure out ways that we can get people housed and get them food and help them while they get through the process of all the government paperwork. So how can you help? So some of the main ways that you can help refugees and immigrants coming into the Norwood community and the greater Massachusetts is collecting donations or volunteering. So many refugees come over with very little, especially as a resettlement agency. We often have to provide a lot of the basic necessities for furnish an entire apartment with all the things that you might need when you first move into an apartment, because people will come over with nothing. And so we rely on donations from community groups to help us do that. And then volunteering as well. Our organization, other organizations have volunteer opportunities where you can help volunteer your time to set up apartments, to welcome refugees and immigrants, help them find food, things like that. Another one is to educate yourself on the issues, on the new policies that are being rolled out, on the, you can even follow our Instagram at React Boston or our Facebook page where we constantly are updating our followers on new policies and issues regarding refugees and immigrants. Another is to advocate for refugees. So be an advocate for them, talk to your local, state, national representatives, talk to your family, friends, people in your community about the needs of refugees and migrants and the issues going on, so that way we can all work together to find a solution. And then lead by example. So being a welcoming person, including the outsider, going out of your way to welcome people into your space and going into new spaces to meet new people can help drastically to help integrate refugees. And so those are some of the main ways that you guys can help. And yeah, so now we're going to turn it over to a Q&A portion of the presentation. So Frank Barnabas, my colleague who is the Preferred Communities Program Director at REACT, is going to come up here and help me answer some questions that you guys have, and join me for that. So, thank you. All right. And do you have a question back there?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, how long does it take, once you get the refugee to you, how long does it take to get them settled into a job and into a home?
It's a 90-day resettlement program, so they have 90 days of support from the agency. But if they need extra support, we are there to help, and that's actually what his program does. Yeah.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
My name is Frank, and thank you all for coming and for giving us this opportunity to talk about what we do. And please feel free to ask us any question. And she was talking about how you asked the question, how long does it take for
Yeah.
refugees? So it depends on the individual, and that's why we have different programs. But mainly, we start with the first program called Reception and Placement, which is a 90-day program. And within this 90 days, we have some core services that we provide to these refugees. From receiving them from the airport, asking them if they have any medical emergency, right at the airport. If they do, we take them straight to the hospital. Otherwise, we take them to a temporary accommodation like a hotel, and then the next day we bring them to the office and do an intake for them. And then, like she mentioned during her presentation, we do first of all cultural orientation and the health assessment. We apply for social security for them. We enroll their kids in school. We help them with employment authorization and food stamps, SNAP benefits, and as well as help them with housing. So that takes up to 90 days. But while you're providing these services to them, you're able to see some refugees that are not going to be able to stand on their feet after 90 days due to a certain vulnerability, or we call them, refugees with more challenges, right? It could be an elderly refugee. It could be a single mother who doesn't speak English, who's probably pregnant as well. So if you leave her after 90 days, how is she gonna call the hospital and schedule an appointment? So when we identify those groups, it could be young adults without parents, just teenagers, because these refugees flee from all kinds of, disaster, all kinds of circumstances, difficult circumstances, and most at times they just flee, leaving behind other family members, whom eventually they get to find out that they are no longer alive or something. So we identify those individuals and then we enroll them into a longer program after the 90 days. Preferred Community is the name of the program. Under preferred communities, we assign case managers to work with them, provide intensive case management for up to a year. But the goal is to help them, teach them how to be independent, how to, navigate the transportation system, how to use just simple as using the ATM card, To us it's nothing, but to them it's a big deal. So it depends on the refugee. The very smart ones, 3 months they are okay. Otherwise, it could take up to 2 years.
In my mind, I was thinking it must take years to get them settled. So to
No,
do it in 3 months, I think that's great.
Yeah, some of them are very educated, and they're here just because of the situation back home, and a lot of them are able to just.
Yes, how do you decide what town? I assume some people have friends or family or acquaintances here, so they probably want to move close to them, but how do you decide, let's say you said, okay, we'll house these people in Norwood. Would you have a Norwood coordinator that you would work with? And would you notify the town of Norwood that you were moving refugees into the town? It seems so nebulous to me.
Yeah,
how the
so
process works.
we vet towns we talk to before we decide that we're going to resettle refugees in a town. We will kind of do a process of meeting all the different stakeholders in the town, the local hospitals, the school district heads, the mayor even, to make sure that there's a capacity here to help the refugees, right? The schools, the medical facilities, they have that capacity before we even consider resettling refugees outside of like the Boston bubble or the Worcester that we're in. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of them, as soon as they arrive, because they need some services that, transportation is very important. They don't drive, hospitals, all of that. So we try to settle them within the Boston metropolis. And on the long run, you also want them to be able to afford, their rents. So we put that into consideration. We cannot rent them a house in Cambridge and pay for a month or two and leave them there. They're not going to be able to make it. So we work with
So you stay mostly in the urban areas to
the
start with?
urban areas where
Okay,
there's
okay.
mass transportation.
So they're unlikely to be here in Norwood? refugees.
Unlikely. We do have some
Okay.
Ukrainians.
Yeah.
Some Ukrainians, even Anatoly is here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, so a lot of like the humanitarian parolees, especially like the Ukrainians, the Haitians, they're coming in, so we're not finding housing for them. A lot of them, especially the Ukrainians, have found housing on their own. They either have money from back home that they're able to just pay for a rent here, and they have credit history and things. So definitely where you come from makes a huge difference because they have access to things like the systems are pretty similar, so they're able to just kind of plug in here. Whereas if you come from a refugee camp where you don't have any of those things, a lot of it can be a lot harder and they need a lot more assistance.
And some Ukrainians have families already in the
Yeah.
United States.
Yeah.
I think it's tremendous if you can place someone in 90 days and they're expected to live that. But how do you deal with the immigrants that have young children? They can't wait 90 days to go to school or 6 months. Is there an educational in-house component anywhere?
Yeah, so we immediately when they come in start going through the process of making sure that they get their immunizations to be able to enroll in school. We start that immediately. So we hope to have them enrolled within the 3 months. And we'll keep so that process. If it's not finished within the 3 months, then we will keep working on it. But all of that should be done within 3 months. It shouldn't take 3 months to enroll them in school unless there's a backlog on their end.
And just one more question, do you find that any people are bringing in unfortunate situations where children are actually orphaned, where because of whatever plight their country was in, their parents are gone, or do you find even that the children have at least one parent, or, has a person brought someone with them, they say,
Yeah, so we don't actually. I don't think we place accompanied minors. We're not placed with unaccompanied minors. I know Essentia and Worcester, they do, and they actually have a whole program for it because they're classified as higher risk, right? They need a little bit more, not a lot more help in others, especially in certain areas. So
Yeah, you're right. But we also have some minors who come with family members who arrive with either an uncle or an aunt, and they also get documentation from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. So they don't just bring them without any documentation. You have to make sure that they're actually legally, able to bring them, to come with them.
So the groups that you were talking about, the Ukrainians and the people and the Haitians who fall under that humanitarian, so those people don't go through REAC, or they do? Because it sounded like that group didn't go through the UN.
Yeah, so they don't come specifically to us. We provide services for them. If they come to us with the paperwork and we sign them up for that, we assign them a case manager and help them get services, but they have to find a refugee agency and they can choose whichever one they want. The refugees that come through the UN system, they get placed with us. They don't actually get to really choose where they go. Whereas they find so it's a little bit different.
Yes, just to shed a little more light on what she explained. So we have two types of refugees. We have those that are sent to us by the State Department, processed by the UN High Commissioner for Refugee. They have a refugee status already. Before they arrive, we receive their information, their paperwork, and we go to the airport. Maybe we're the ones you see with the name tag, you know. We receive them. So these ones the ORR and the local ORR's Office of Refugee Resettlement, that is under the State Department. Here in Massachusetts, we have the ORI, which is Office of Refugees and Immigrants. So they both have programs and funding for refugees. Now we also have parolees these are refugees who come through the border, but not everyone that comes through the border that we are able to help. When you get to the border, you get processed by the CBP, the Customs and Border Patrol. You tell them your story. If they believe that you are eligible for a humanitarian parole, they give you a paperwork. And with that, first of all, they admit you into the country temporarily. They grant you maybe a year or 2 parole, but you still have to go to the immigration court to, file for your asylum, try to get your lawful permanent resident status. But in the meantime, once you're paroled into the country, that is the only eligibility document that qualifies you for us to provide assistance for you. So that's what we do.
Can I ask a follow-up on the distinction? I used to work at JVS, so thanks for the shout out to JVS. And the biggest privilege of my life was supporting refugees. But I know that refugees coming through the state system get refugee cash assistance as well.
Yes.
Parolees, I think, probably do not. Is that right? They
At
do?
the moment,
They do.
not all of them.
Oh, no.
Ukrainians get Cubans, get
Cubans, Haitians,
Cubans,
Ukrainians, and Afghans. Yeah, that's it, yeah.
How do they determine who gets it and who doesn't?
They have to be, so for the humanitarian parolee status basically designates them as refugee types. And since they're designated as refugee types, like Nicaraguans, for example, can get TPS, so temporary protective status, but because they're not a refugee type, then they don't get DTA services, RCA, cash assistance, work author, all of that extra stuff.
Yes, Nicaraguans and Venezuelans.
Yeah, there's a few that are allowed to be here, but it's a different
I think
designation.
it's at the government's discretion as well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
They decide who.
Yeah.
It makes their situation more dire because then they're coming and then not only they have temporary status and then they also don't get any cash. They get no money assistance.
Yeah.
So I've been working with a group of volunteers to help resettle an Afghan family. And they're now, and so what we're hearing from the local resettlement agency is self-sufficiency. And everything is all about self-sufficiency. And, we're approaching, I think it's 2 years now we've been here. They're not quite there yet. And so it seems as though it remains up to us as a volunteer committee to continue to help them and guide them along as much as we can. It seems as though the resettlement agency is helping on immigration matters and working them to get their visas and their status here in order. But we're kind of like treading water in the sense of, what do other groups do? And so my question is there any kind of networking? I don't know if it's a Facebook group or some other kind of networking way that we can talk to a lot of, we do to a limited degree, but I would like to expand that and find out what other groups who are similarly situated have done and how, the challenges that we have now are different than when they first came on board.
Yeah. So there's actually, the U.S. government is rolling out a new program called Welcome Corps, which is basically, it's groups of 5 people can come together create a group, raise money, and sponsor refugees. They've piloted this program, I believe, on their Welcome Corps websites. I know they did a whole like Q&A Zoom session where they had people who were part of these groups talk about their experience with helping refugee families, similar to your experience, and the challenges they faced and things, and you know, how they overcame them, and also the positives of it as well. So I would probably refer you to some of those resources.
And it's called Welcome Corps.
Welcome Corps, yeah.
And-
Welcome CORP. Like,
Yeah. But is there anything local that's
Local?
not,
So-
not through the U.S. government, but
Yeah.
more, closely knit?
Yeah, so during the, I know when a lot of the Afghans were coming in, a lot of RAs didn't have the capacity to help the large amount of people that were coming as efficiently, so we did rely on outside community groups, and we did that as well. We had a few organizations, mainly faith-based organizations, so Bethel Temple up in Belmont. We had Emmanuel Church as well, help resettle refugees, and they had, and we worked with them. So they are our community partners, and they have experience doing that. So if you want to reach out to some of them to ask for some, just to talk, some guidance, things like that. I know that has been a big issue even with our own volunteer groups that are working with the families, is really, getting to that point where they're like 2 years in and they don't feel like their family is as self-sufficient, and they don't know how to like start to pull away. And that's definitely, so that's like a thing that we have seen kind of pop up. So it's definitely not just unique to your group, and I think that they might be able to, talk with you about that too if you wanted to. But
I can come afterwards and
Yeah.
give you those names.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. And we're here also to establish, working relationship. So I would also advise that you are free to come, to the office, and we can actually sit down and talk about this and see how we can help. Since we're creating partnership, that's the goal of our mission today, to create partnership and see how we can. We've learned from, experience, it was very challenging when Afghans were being, brought into the United States, and there were just a lot of surge, and we learned, and today we know how to, take care of situations.
And you hit on the immediate crisis because, we got a lot of donations, we do a lot of fundraising at the front end.
Yes.
And we've been helping them by
Yes.
partially supporting their rent.
Yes.
And that just can't last forever. And so we're coming up on, our next crisis of the experience is, okay, they need to either fish or cut bait for the lease renewal. And what do? So it's the housing issue.
And this is my area. I manage the Afghan program, both in our office here in Boston and Augusta, with over 700 clients, family, and like you said, the goal is for them to be self-sufficient, to be independent. And to be honest, like a lot of them, we provide, we pay their rent, and we support them in everything, and we're beginning to see them driving to the office to pick up their rent check, with a Mercedes, driving, some are even buying properties. We're happy for it, but it's time to win them, how do you win a lady, right? And so sorry, I'll get to you. I totally understand your frustration. A lot of them have become so dependent. Even though they are making money, they don't want to, whenever they want to come to the office, they dress like they're poor, When they go back and their life is okay, so we ask them hard questions. How much are you making? How many adults do you have in the house? What is the total household income? If you're making this amount of money, then forget it.
We've had those conversations 20 times. with a family, and it gets to a point where, you know, where we're not sure why we're getting the pushback that we're getting, but, and I don't want to guess at what it is, but it's not, what we see as to how they're spending their money is not something that we see them leading to self-sufficiency unless they move, they give up their job, the kids leave school, and they got to move, like you say, to an urban area.
And sometimes they also have misplaced priorities. Sending money back home, going to the grocery store, going to the
So that's a big topic. No, where in the scheme of things is sending money back home? Because I suspect there's a cultural piece to it, and we want to be compassionate. Plus, there's boundaries. We can't tell them how much money they can spend and on what. That's what they need to do.
Yeah, 100%. That's since you are also paying for part of their rent. I agree with you. You don't have, there is that boundary there. You don't want to tell them how to spend their money. They can spend their money how they want to spend their money. But maybe even just scaling back how much of the portion of the rent that you are paying and giving hard deadlines so they have to, almost, I mean, as much as it sucks to say it, sometimes they have to sink or swim, right? Like, you can't keep supporting them for...
Well, that's interesting, because that's one thing that came up in a conversation in a meeting we had last week, is maybe they have to go through some hardships here, right?
Yeah, because that's part of self-sufficiency, is that we encourage... It's not that we want to see our clients struggle, but to struggle is not always a bad thing. Sometimes you have to figure out how to do something on your own and work through the problem yourself. It's also, that's a form of self-sufficiency. It also can empower them to really embrace and take ownership of their new life and their new and in their new communities and all of that. So that's something that we try to encourage is a healthy amount of struggle.
I have so many questions. But let me start with one question about who is it that sets the policies around the different migrant groups? For instance, our church helps an asylee family, and our understanding is that they are not able to legally work until they get through the immigration process. Who says you can't work while you're here? And which groups are allowed to work and not work, and is that state-based or federally based? That we just have some questions. I have some questions about that.
It's federally based. So asylum seekers, they come in seeking asylum. So they have no designation of status. They are here they are applying to be refugees, right? And instead of doing that outside of the country through the UNHCR, they're doing that in the United States to the USCIS. I believe it's the organization that handles that. There's a lot of acronyms in this field. So, and so they apply directly to them. So they don't have any status, which is why they don't have work authorization. For specific countries like the Haitian Cuban entrants, the Ukrainians, because of the crises going on in their home countries, they've been designated special status to be able to work and be here temporarily. And then if you are a refugee, then you do get work authorization.
And then that was a follow-up question. You mentioned the backlog of work authorization. How long is that currently for the temporary, the parolees right now?
So it seems like it depends on who it is. So the Ukrainians, there hasn't really been too much of a backlog. It could take 1 to 2 months. The Haitians are seeing a 6 to 7 month backlog. So I don't know exactly how that department works, but I was just talking to people from the DTA that were saying that it can take 6 to 7 months once they fill out the application. Once they do the biometric portion of it, it seems to go like it shouldn't, or the fingerprinting. I think it's like a month after that usually, but it's hard to say.
And the asylum process can take years as well.
Oh yes, the asylum process can take years. Yes.
But that I can add something to what she mentioned. It depends on where the refugee is coming from. For Afghans, July 28, 2021, Congress passed a law to for their asylum to be expedited, and it provides under the law, under the bill, that once their asylum is submitted, they must be interviewed within 45 days, and a determination must be made within 150 days. So we're talking 6 months maximum, and we have seen that happen. I personally applied for over 500 asylums for my Afghan clients, and a lot of them got their asylums approved and within a few weeks.
But if you are not fortunate to be from one of those particular countries, the average can be
Years.
3 to 10
3
years.
to 10 years.
While you're waiting to, you can't.
For Ukrainians, it's a little bit different. I know a client who personally went to the USCIS office. They gave him the form and asked him to fill the form. He did that and he was granted asylum right there and then. So it depends on where you're coming from.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. Some of the refugees that do come in, you kind of alluded that some of them might eventually go home. What is the actual percentage of that? I work with a large group of, I'm the only woman in a male-dominated field. A lot of my employees are from different Hispanic communities around the world. And once they get here and they settle in, they don't want to go back. So they go through the process and they become citizens eventually. It is a long ordeal. And we sponsor them and, help them with everything. But what is the actual percentage of people that come to this country fleeing for whatever reason? What's the actual percentage of them actually going back to their country? Because I've never met anybody that has returned to their native land after coming to the United States.
I'm afraid that's the data I do not have.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know that number either, but I know that if you look at a lot of the recent refugees we've had come in from Syria, Ukraine, Afghanistan, like the issues that they are fleeing are still very much problems in those countries. It's still not safe for them to go back. Haiti as well. You're seeing, I'm sure a lot of in Hispanic countries too, it's conditions haven't necessarily improved, especially if you're seeking asylum. It's because you have a fear of going back, right? There's that level of fear that you can't live in your country anymore. So the hope is with this temporary status is that eventually, for example, the Ukraine-Russian war ends, right? They could go back to their country. So right now, it was only approved for 2 years, and they're looking at extending it, but they were hoping that they wouldn't have to. Was the idea when they first put this into place. So it's one of those things. It's like a waiting game. But I definitely think there's a handful of our clients that definitely, if they could go back, especially like I know Ukrainians, I work with a lot of them, I know they are very eager to go back. I don't know about if you want to speak on.
I personally know a few, that have gone back. We were talking about one of our clients today. He left his family here and he moved back. He asked her to come with him, and she said no. It is hard to go back, and this I just want to be practical. When you spend after resettling in the United States, you have all these credit cards, you have probably a mortgage, and you have your kids in school. It is very difficult to just eject yourself from the system. So that's why most people want to go back, but they already have established family, private life here, and it's just difficult for them to leave.
Now, does your agency have a list of companies
employers that are willing to take refugees or anything like that? And how does an employer get on that list to take people and train them and, you know, give them work and?
An employer, we do have companies like Marriott, Hilton Hotel. They are asking us to provide 1,500 refugees to hire. So we've been, you know, filling out applications for them, mostly as housekeepers and all of that. So we partner with some employers. She also talked about JVS. We also send our referrals to JVS.
Dunkin' Donuts,
Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, so there's a lot of organizations that hire refugees. In terms of specific employers, we are a pretty small agency, so it's basically on like we don't have like a vast list. If an employer comes to us and says, hey, we're looking to hire refugees, we will work with them and see which clients we have to match them and kind of start to build a relationship with them. So it very much is because we refer a lot of our clients to JVS, and then we have a few handfuls of organizations. It's basically just you know, when people approach us, we work on building that relationship. Kind of thing.
I wouldn't really say that we are small.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, we've been around for over 30 years. We have an office in Worcester, Lynn, and here, and we do a lot. We have resettled so many refugees. You know, but when she says we're small, I
Sorry, just yeah.
How about if we wanted to volunteer?
Yeah.
Where would we? Is there a central location? Does your organization have we're looking for volunteers for this, or would you be more likely to go through a community group like a church or something? I wouldn't know where to go to find a volunteer opportunity.
Beautiful. Thank you for this question. Let me take it. We have community partners, groups that come together and work with us. We also have individual volunteers, and we encourage everyone to come and volunteer. There's always something to do to help the refugee. It could be just teaching them English language, you know. It could be reading their mails for them, explaining which one to respond to, you know, what is this and that. So we have a process. You can come to the office, you know, we go through some training, orientation, because, you know, they come from different cultures and backgrounds, so we explain all of that and do some paperwork. She's actually in charge of that, but I just wanted to explain first before I
just reach out to you.
Yeah, to me, or so we're actually in the process of kind of revamping our volunteer program. So there's a few different ways you can get involved. Kind of, you mentioned a handful of them, but we're looking for, like, one of the large things is transport support. So helping either drive clients to medical appointments, to pick up donations for us and deliver them and bring them to us is a big thing, or other transport needs, picking people up from the airport, that kind of thing. Then we have people to help set up apartments, to help, like, you know, just even, we get furniture from an organization, but just setting it up, placing it, basically making a house a home for refugees is a big one, and helping with cultural orientation, like he mentioned, you know, taking people to grocery stores or just bringing them out to Boston, showing them around their new community, things like that, and then program support such as English classes and citizenship classes and all of that. So you can, currently our website is in maintenance mode, but if you go to our Instagram, in our link tree in our bio, the link in our bio, there's actually a place to fill out a volunteer form, or my card's up front if you just want to email me, and I can go through that process with you.
So there's no doubt that those who qualify as refugees have experienced primary, secondary trauma.
Yeah.
Does your organization have mental health providers? How is that how does that?
That is a great question, because we actually have a mental health clinic in-house.
Yes.
So that's one of our main branches of our organization. It is for both our clients and the outside community. All of our clinicians are trauma trained. They work with refugee immigrant groups as well as other people, and we accept outside clients as well as our own clients. So that's a big part of, because that is a very big component to the refugee resettlement system, is a lot of our clients come in with some kind of trauma.
Adding to what she just said, you cannot achieve self-sufficiency without fixing their mental health problems. No matter what you teach them, they can never, pay attention or understand. So, 95% of refugees that come here have some kind of PTSD. So we do mental health assessment for them, screening, and then we have therapists, clinicians, and we also have students who come for their internships. So we have a clinic basically for mental health. It is one very important part of what we do. We provide counseling for them, and we have seen the impact, the negative, the positive impact, the results, because when they first arrive, you're talking to a refugee and they're lost. They're just standing listening to you, but they're not paying attention because they're still going through so much. So we have a mental health clinic, and that's also an area. If you guys have expertise in those areas, we will need your help.
I'm curious, do many refugees come with highly skilled, able to get high-paying jobs?
Yes, it really depends on where they're from. A lot of the Ukrainians have come with backgrounds. We've had quite a few Afghans come with highly skilled work. We've had, so there's quite a few.
Limitations, language, isn't it?
The language and certificates and criteria. So if you have a law degree in Afghanistan, that doesn't correlate here. So you could be a lawyer in Afghanistan, you come here, you can't be. You have to, study, take the bar, and all of that. So it's there's a lot of roadblocks such like that can prevent people from being able to do highly skilled work here, even though they were highly skilled workers back home.
When we identify them, we hire some of them, and then some we also encourage to find a way to transfer, and so we encourage them, we register them in college and all of that, and we find mentors. So that's why we need volunteers to work with them, to mentor them and push them until they are able to maybe key into their profession here in the United States.
Can you just talk a little bit more? I'm a public school teacher, but not in Norway. Just about the children, because I see it every day. They just come, their parents come to the door, and it's their first day, and they can't speak English.
That's definitely, I will say that kids can be very resilient. They tend to learn English faster than their parents because they hear it all day in school. They can, we've seen a lot of our clients that our kids thrive, even with rocky starts. I know that can be really hard on educators and the system to have kids coming in, that, don't know the language and are new and all of that.
Do you have social workers that work with you and then they communicate with the school? How do you make that connection to the school? Do you know what I mean? And because then we sort of take over.
Yeah.
So I was just curious.
Yeah. So I know the Boston Public School System has a pretty large program to help refugees and also immigrant students who don't speak English. They have extra classes for them, ESL classes, extra help that they can get in the classroom and things like that to support them. I don't know if you want to have any knowledge like that.
You're right. when they first arrive, let me use the Afghans as an example. When they first arrived, none of them spoke any English, the children. But today, we see all of them speaking English very fluent, and they are also able to translate for their parents. So, like she mentioned, they pick up language very fast, especially at that age.
And in our group, we have an educator in our volunteer group, and we have a speech pathologist in our group, and so they connected with the schools, with the school. And when assessments needed, evaluation, early, it's called early detection, assessments are needed, they kind of pushed that and made them happen.
Yeah, so I was wondering if that volunteering, would that typically be like working with one family on an ongoing basis, or is it more like a series of one-offs with different families?
It depends. We have like different options in that case. We don't tend to have families helping, or like volunteers helping families. We have some volunteers that help families for extended periods of time, depending on the family's needs. If they're in the preferred communities and they have, and we've identified something that a volunteer can help this family with, a volunteer can work with them for 6+ months. Sometimes we have one-off situations where, like in our R&P program, when we have refugees first come, their first trip to the grocery store could be a little daunting. They don't necessarily know where everything is and, how everything works. So just having a volunteer go with them on that one time to just kind of like, be a guide to show them the way, or to do transportation orientation that only really takes like 1 or 2 times to kind of help them figure it out. So there's there's varying levels.
So if I can kind of put a plug in for the library's literacy and ESL program, that I think it's an 18-hour training for one-to-one tutors for ESL, and what a great way to help new immigrants. Also, the Norwood Church of God they're working on a separate 501c3 for an adult learning center for ESL, and are eager for anyone who has expertise in that, or as an ESL teacher.
And Blue Hills Tech too.
And Blue Hills Tech, yeah. So there are some things that are a little bit more local to Norwood that people might be able to plug in with their volunteering.
That's amazing, because I know the ESL programs are all like have long wait lists and everything. It's really hard to get them into to programs quickly.
And Norwood Public Schools has one smaller program as well that's kind of within, trying to connect parents and students with kind of accelerated learning.
That's awesome.
Just to add to what she explained, to add to what she said, it depends on who you want to help. Is it a family, an individual? So it's a volunteer, opportunity and work. So there is nothing like you can decide to help one family just one day and that's it, and we are grateful.
I have a question. You mentioned about mentoring people, and sometimes if they are highly skilled in their own countries, to transfer their skills here or have them credentialed here. So does all of this take place in your center, or would you like community partners like us? Because we have the technology, we have the space. How can we help? Or is it only center based?
Like I mentioned earlier, we have different programs. We have reception and placement, 90 days, and you close their files, they're gone, right? You also have a preferred community, which is like a year program, sometimes 2. So when you identify these clients, you work with them. If you choose maybe 3 or 4 areas: transportation, education, finance, or maybe housing, right? So you assign a case manager who is going to work with them. Now, if they want to go to school, you find the volunteer who can help them, who can advise them, who can mentor them. You and I, we have worked with the Ethiopian girls. We've worked with Mahabuba. She's now a medical assistant. We registered her, and so yes, it depends on the client. If it is just an RFP client, but if they come back to us and say, hey, this is what I want to do with my life, we will look for a volunteer who can help them.
And then in terms of where, we would find these mentors, depending on the client and their ability to go far. If they do have a car they can drive, and they can get to Norwood, or if they live close to Norwood. We also have a lot of volunteers that help virtually over Zoom. That's another thing that we do. So there's definitely different ways that we can connect people.
We do have train stations here, the two of them.
Yeah, people can take public transportation.
Would you ever offer training to people who wanted to volunteer, if you wanted to do something, like, I think you're saying, like, could we host something here at the library?
Exactly,
right?
because we have space, right? And so
Right.
if people, if say you have somebody who, you have a group of people, for example, who see some basic needs like computer literacy, whatever, but they are not at your center, maybe they are suburbs or they can travel. And if you don't have space at the center, could we provide spaces or something like that?
That would be
Not as an
incredibly
individual
helpful,
personal need, but
yeah.
as a library.
Because one of the big things that we don't have is really access to large amounts of things like technology. So in the sense of like, we could like host a program here where we could use the computers and things like that would be really helpful. And those are the community partnerships that we're always looking to kind of expand on and to grow.
And you mentioned PTSD as well. So we have, as I mentioned, we have a room, support groups, and we do book these for outside organizations or non-profit, for not charging anything for their services. So that's something to consider as well. Is that just something to keep at the back of your mind.
For sure.
There are support groups you are running for people who say no longer serve, but help actively, but still need some help, or they want to just talk to their own community members. And not just this library, but I'm sure pretty much in all public libraries in Massachusetts would probably be very happy to provide that service.
Working with immigrants, with refugees, can be very, very interesting and also very rewarding. There's that need to continue to teach them something, orientation. What we are experiencing now is that most of our Afghan drivers have been getting ticket violations. They took the test, they passed their driving, and they got their license, but they cannot read the signs. They park, resident parking, fire hydrants, and all of that. So we need like a space like this to teach them the signs, bring them together. And they just have their first insurance, and instead of going down, cultural orientation and just always teaching them new stuff.
Any other questions?
I was just kind of curious, you were talking about setting up people for apartments. Are you partnered with New Life Furniture Bank in Walpole?
That is a really good question. I actually do not know I don't think so. I think it's someplace in Boston. Is it? I don't know. I don't communicate with that organization. That's our RP department that does that, so I can't say for sure exactly.
Let's write it down.
Yeah, yeah. If you don't mind, just afterwards we can talk and write that down because that would be a good place to look into. Do they do furniture donations for?
They do furniture donations. They do kitchen supplies and anything needed for setting up. They do for transitioning people out of homelessness.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
But I didn't know if they did refugees.
They did stuff for refugees. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's always worth a phone call. Awesome. Thank you. Anything else? No? All right. Well, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it.